Working the night shift at the Meridian office complex was supposed to be simple. I'd been cleaning office buildings for 5 years, and the routine was always the same. Empty the trash, vacuum the floors, clean the bathrooms, wipe down the desks, and get out before the morning shift arrived. The pay was decent, and I liked working alone, but it was not something I really loved doing. But life happens. The cleaning company assigned me to work with a partner on this particular building, a guy named Marcus who'd been with the company for about 2 years. He was quiet, kept to himself, and seemed competent enough. We'd divide the floors between us and finish faster than if either of us worked alone. For the first month, everything was professional. We'd meet in the lobby at 10 p.m., go over which floors each of us would handle, and work independently until around 2 a.m. Marcus was efficient, showed up on time, and didn't cause any problems. I actually preferred having a partner. It made the empty building feel less isolated. But then Marcus started changing our routine. It started with small things. He'd suggest we take our breaks together instead of separately. He'd ask if I needed help with my floors, even when I clearly didn't. He'd find excuses to walk past whatever section I was working on, always with some reasonable explanation about needing supplies or checking something. I chalked it up to friendliness at first. Some people are just more social than others, and maybe he was trying to be helpful. But something about his attention felt off, too focused, too persistent. Then he started making comments. "You're really good at this job," he'd say, watching me clean. "Very thorough, very dedicated." Or he'd mention how nice it was to work with someone who took care of themselves and dressed professionally. Nothing overtly inappropriate, but the way he said it, the way he looked at me when he said it, I figured maybe he likes me or something. I started avoiding him as much as possible. I'd take different floors, different break times, anything to minimize our interactions. But the building only had so many floors, and we were the only 2 people there most nights. The situation escalated about 6 weeks into the assignment. I was working on the 4th floor, cleaning the law offices, when Marcus appeared in the hallway. He wasn't supposed to be on that floor. We'd agreed he'd handle the lower floors while I did the upper ones. "Hey, Sarah," he said, blocking the doorway of the office I was cleaning. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, not looking up from the desk I was wiping down. "About us." The way he said it made me freeze. There was no us. We were co-workers, nothing more. But the expectation in his voice, the assumption that there was something between us that needed to be discussed, told me this conversation was going to go somewhere I didn't want it to go. "Marcus, we're just work partners," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's nothing to talk about." "Don't be like that," he said, stepping into the office. "I know you've noticed the way I look at you, the way you look at me sometimes." I hadn't looked at him any particular way. I'd been professional, polite, and nothing more. But I could see in his eyes that he'd built up some kind of fantasy in his head, and my rejection was not going to be well received. "I think we should stick to work," I said, moving toward the door. "I have 3 more offices to finish." He stepped sideways, blocking my path. "Why are you being so cold? We're alone here every night. We could make this more interesting." That's when I knew I was in trouble. The way he was looking at me, the way he was positioning himself between me and the exit, the expectation in his voice. This wasn't going to end with me politely declining his advances. "Marcus, move," I said firmly. "I want to finish my work." "Your work can wait," he said, reaching toward me. "Come on, Sarah. Don't pretend you don't want this." I dodged away from his hand and tried to push past him, but he grabbed my arm. Not gently, not playfully, but hard enough to leave marks. "Let go of me," I said, pulling away. "Or what?" he asked, his grip tightening. "Who's going to stop me? It's just you and me here." That's when I realized how isolated we really were. The building was empty, the security guard only did rounds twice a night, and no one would be looking for us until morning. Marcus had been planning this, waiting for the right moment when he could be sure we wouldn't be interrupted. I managed to break free from his grip and ran toward the hallway, but he was faster than me. He caught up before I could reach the stairwell and shoved me toward the supply closet at the end of the hall. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, forcing me into the small room filled with cleaning supplies and maintenance equipment. The supply closet was barely 6 feet by 8 feet, with no windows and only one way in or out. As soon as we were inside, Marcus slammed the door and turned the deadbolt. The room was pitch black except for the thin strip of light coming from under the door. "Now we can have some privacy," he said, and I could hear him moving toward me in the darkness. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a mop handle, and swung it as hard as I could in the direction of his voice. I heard him curse as it connected with something, and he stumbled backward. "You bitch," he yelled, lunging toward me. What happened next was pure survival instinct. I fought back with everything I had, kicking, scratching, hitting him with whatever I could grab from the shelves around us. Bottles of cleaning solution crashed to the floor, metal equipment clattered against the walls. And through it all, Marcus kept trying to pin me down while I kept fighting to get away. The struggle felt like it lasted forever, but it was probably only a few minutes. Marcus was stronger than me, but the confined space worked in my favor. He couldn't use his size advantage effectively, and I knew where everything was because I'd been restocking that closet for weeks. During the fight, I managed to grab a box cutter from one of the shelves and slash at him with it. He screamed and backed away, and I heard him crash into the door. "You crazy bitch," he yelled, but his voice sounded different now, pained, uncertain. I knew this was my only chance. The door was deadbolt from the inside, but there was a small window high up on the back wall that led to the alley behind the building. It was meant for ventilation, probably hadn't been opened in years, but it was my only way out. I climbed up on the shelving unit and started hitting the window with a heavy-duty flashlight. The glass was thick and reinforced, but after several hits, it started to crack. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, but he sounded disoriented, maybe hurt worse than I'd thought. "Getting out of here," I said, continuing to hit the window. The glass finally gave way, but it shattered into large, jagged pieces. I had to clear them away with my hands, cutting my palms and fingers in the process. Blood was running down my arms, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out. The window was small, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through, and it was a 10-foot drop to the alley below. But staying in that room with Marcus wasn't an option. I pulled myself through the window, feeling the remaining glass tear at my clothes and skin, and dropped into the alley. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I think I sprained my ankle, but I was out. I ran to the front of the building and called the police from the security desk. When they arrived, they found Marcus still in the supply closet, bleeding from several cuts and apparently too disoriented to figure out how to unlock the door from the inside. He was arrested and later convicted of attempted sexual assault and false imprisonment. The trial was a nightmare, having to relive that night, having to explain why I didn't report his earlier behavior, having to defend my decision to fight back instead of trying to talk him out of it. But the worst part was learning that this was his first offense. There had never been a single complaint from his previous jobs. What came to my mind was that he was not thinking straight that night, and he let his sexual desire get the of him. I didn't feel sorry for him though, because I was the victim of his act. I quit that job the day after the incident. The company offered me counseling, a transfer to day shift, even a promotion to supervisor. But I couldn't handle the idea of being alone in empty buildings anymore, especially with male co-workers I didn't know well. The physical injuries healed. The cuts on my hands left scars, but they're barely visible now. The psychological damage took longer to deal with. I still have trouble sleeping, still jump when someone approaches me unexpectedly, still feel anxious in confined spaces. But I survived. I fought back when it mattered most, and I got out of that room before Marcus could do what he'd planned to do. Not everyone in similar situations is that lucky. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the building is the one wearing the same uniform as you. Working the night shift at McDonald's wasn't supposed to be this complicated. I was just trying to pay for community college, you know? The place was pretty dead after 11 p.m. on weekdays, which meant I could usually get some studying done between cleaning the fryer and restocking cups. It was around 1:30 a.m. when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. We got prank calls all the time from drunk college kids. But something made me pick up that greasy receiver. McDonald's, this is Jake. This is Detective Morrison with the County Police Department. The voice was authoritative, professional. I need to speak with the manager on duty immediately. My manager, Susan, was in the back office counting the till. She was this no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd been running night shifts for years. When I told her a detective was on the phone, she gave me this look like she was expecting bad news. "Put him through to the office," she said. I transferred the call and went back to wiping down tables, but something felt off. The conversation was going on for a long time, like really long. I kept glancing toward the office, and I could see Susan through the window, nodding and writing stuff down. After about 20 minutes, she came out looking pale and shaken. "Jake, I need you to come to the office." Now, the detective was still on the phone when we got back there. Susan put it on speaker, and that's when my world started falling apart. "We have a situation," the voice said. "We've been tracking a theft ring, and one of your employees matches the description of someone who's been stealing from customers. We need to conduct an immediate search." I felt my stomach drop. "What? Who?" "The young male employee currently on shift. We need to search him for stolen items and money." Susan was looking at me with this expression I'd never seen before, like she was seeing me for the first time. "Jake, I don't know what to say." "Ma'am, this is a very serious situation," the detective continued. "We need to conduct this search immediately, or we'll have to shut down your location and bring everyone downtown. This needs to be handled quietly and professionally." The next hour was the most humiliating experience of my life. Following the detective's instructions over the phone, Susan made me empty my pockets, take off my uniform shirt, my shoes. Each step felt more surreal than the last. "Check his wallet thoroughly," the voice instructed. "Count every bill and tell me the serial numbers." I kept thinking this had to be some kind of mistake. I'd never stolen anything in my life. But the detective sounded so professional, so certain. And Susan was following every instruction like her life depended on it. "Now we need to check for concealed items," the voice said. "Have him remove his pants." That's when I finally spoke up. "This is insane. I'm not doing this. Son, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to assume you're guilty and send units to arrest you immediately. Your cooperation now could be the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony charge." The fear in that room was thick enough to cut. Susan was shaking, I was shaking, and this faceless voice on the phone was orchestrating the whole thing like some kind of puppet master. "There's a female employee who just came in for the morning shift," the detective said. "We need her to conduct the physical search to ensure everything is done properly." That's when Amy walked in. She was this sweet girl from my psychology class, and seeing her face when Susan explained what was happening, I wanted to disappear. The whole thing escalated from there. The detective had Susan lock the doors, turn off the lights in the dining area, and continue the investigation in the back office. He had explanations for everything. Why we couldn't call the local police directly, why this had to be done immediately, why each increasingly invasive step was necessary. It wasn't until Amy was crying and refusing to follow any more instructions that Susan finally said, "I'm calling the police myself." "Ma'am, I am the police," the voice said, but for the first time, it sounded defensive. "Then you won't mind if I verify this with your department." The line went dead. When the real police arrived 20 minutes later, they told us we'd been victims of a hoax that had been happening across the country. Some sick individual had been calling fast food restaurants, pretending to be a detective, and manipulating employees into degrading situations. But here's the thing that still haunts me. It wasn't just the hoax itself. It was how easily we all went along with it. How fear and the illusion of authority could make rational people do irrational things. How a voice on the phone could turn a normal Tuesday night into a nightmare that would follow all of us for years. I quit that job the next day. Susan was fired by corporate and Amy. Well, she all right now. And somewhere out there, the person who made that call probably moved on to the next restaurant, the next night shift, the next group of people just trying to get through another shift. And it could happen again. Tonight. Tomorrow. To anyone who answers the phone during a quiet night shift and hears that authoritative voice saying, "This is Detective Morrison." They say the night shift at Mercy General is when you really learn what it means to be a nurse. I'd been working days for 3 years, but the pay differential for nights was too good to pass up. Plus, I figured it would be quieter, fewer administrators, less bureaucracy, more time to actually focus on patient care. I was wrong about the quiet part. It was my second week on nights when everything went to hell. I was working the emergency department, which in a level 1 trauma center means you see everything. Overdoses, accidents, domestic violence, shootings. You develop thick skin pretty quickly, or you don't last. The shift started normally enough. A few routine cases, some paperwork, the usual controlled chaos. My supervisor, Dr. Martinez, was this veteran physician who'd been working nights for 15 years. She had this way of staying calm, no matter what came through those doors. Around 2 a.m., we got a call about an incoming ambulance. Multiple GSWs, ETA 5 minutes. Dispatch crackled through the radio. Gunshot wounds weren't unusual, but multiple victims meant it was going to be a long night. What they didn't tell us was that the shooter was still active. The first ambulance arrived with 2 victims. A man in his 30s with chest wounds and a teenager who'd been shot in the leg. Standard protocol: triage, stabilize, treat. We'd done this dance 100 times before. But as we were working on the chest wound patient, I noticed something odd. The paramedic who'd brought him in was acting strange. Nervous, sweating, kept looking toward the entrance like he was expecting something. "Everything okay?" I asked him. "Just be careful tonight," he said. This wasn't random. Before I could ask what he meant, the second ambulance arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. By 2:30 a.m., we had 7 gunshot victims, all from the same apartment complex. The waiting room was filling up with family members, police officers, and people I couldn't identify. Dr. Martinez was in full command mode, directing traffic, making split-second decisions about who needed surgery first. But I could see the strain in her eyes. This wasn't normal, even for us. That's when Officer Rodriguez pulled me aside. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "The shooter, we haven't found him yet. And we have reason to believe he might be connected to one of these victims." My blood ran cold. Connected how? Family. The apartment complex shooting? It was domestic. But the pattern? It's like he was working through a list. The next few hours were a blur of medical procedures punctuated by moments of pure terror. Every time someone walked through those doors, we didn't know if it was another victim, a family member, or the person who'd created this nightmare. Around 4 a.m., things got worse. A man in his 40s came in claiming to be the father of one of the victims. He was agitated, demanding to see his son, getting increasingly hostile when we tried to explain about visiting hours and patient privacy. "You don't understand," he kept saying. "I need to see him now. He's all I have left." Dr. Martinez was with another patient, so I was trying to calm him down when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. His hands were shaking, and there was what looked like blood under his fingernails. Fresh blood. I caught the eye of Officer Rodriguez, who was stationed near the entrance. He started walking over, but the man saw him coming, and his whole demeanor changed. The grief-stricken father act dropped, and something cold and calculating took its place. "Which room?" he asked me quietly. "Sir, I can't. Which room is Tommy in?" The way he said it made me realize this wasn't a father looking for his son. This was someone who'd come to finish what he'd started. I hit the panic button under the nurse's station, just as he pulled out a gun. The next few seconds felt like hours. People screaming, diving for cover, the sound of Rodriguez yelling for backup. But here's what really stays with me. In that moment of chaos, Dr. Martinez didn't run. She stepped between the gunman and her patients. This 50-year-old woman with 2 kids at home put herself in the line of fire to protect people she'd never met before that night. The standoff lasted 43 minutes. The gunman, who turned out to be the estranged boyfriend of one of the victims, kept demanding to see his girl, while pointing the weapon at anyone who moved. The entire emergency department was locked down, with patients and staff trapped inside. Sweat eventually took him down with a clean shot, but not before he'd fired twice more. One bullet went into the ceiling. The other went into Dr. Martinez's shoulder as she was trying to shield an elderly patient. She survived, obviously, but she never came back to night shift. Hell, I don't think she ever came back to the ED at all. Last I heard, she was working day shift in pediatrics, somewhere safe and predictable. I stayed on nights for another 2 months, but something had changed. Every time someone walked through those doors, I found myself looking at their hands, their eyes, trying to assess whether they were there for help or to cause harm. The thing about working nights in a hospital is that you see people at their worst moments. But that night taught me something darker. Sometimes the person causing the worst moment is standing right next to you, pretending to be just another scared family member. I transferred back to days eventually, but I still think about that night. About how quickly normal can become nightmare. About how Dr. Martinez's split-second decision to be a shield instead of seeking shelter probably saved lives that night. Driving for Uber wasn't supposed to be permanent. I was between jobs, had bills to pay, and the gig economy seemed like a quick way to make some cash while I figured out my next move. Night shifts paid better, surge pricing, drunk college kids, airport runs. Easy money, or so I thought. The thing about driving nights is that you develop instincts. After a few weeks, you can tell within 30 seconds if a ride is going to be smooth or problematic. Drunk but harmless. Sketchy but manageable. Potentially dangerous. You learn to read people fast. But sometimes your instincts are wrong. It was a Thursday night, around 11:30 p.m., when I got the ping. Pick up at an apartment complex on the south side of town. Not the best neighborhood, but not the worst either. The destination was listed as downtown, about a 15-minute drive. Standard fare. I pulled up to the address and saw a woman waiting by the curb. Mid-20s, professional looking, carrying a small purse and what looked like a laptop bag. She matched the photo on the app, and she was alone. All green flags. "Sarah," I called out as she approached the car. "That's me," she said, getting into the back seat. "Thanks for picking me up so quickly." She seemed normal enough, polite, well-dressed, not obviously intoxicated. She gave me the address again, which matched what was in the app, and we started driving. The first few minutes were typical small talk. She mentioned she was heading to meet a friend downtown, asked about my night, commented on the weather. Nothing unusual. But then we hit a red light about 5 minutes into the trip, and she got a phone call. "Hey, yeah, I'm in the car now," she said. "Should be there in about 10 minutes. Standard conversation, except something in her tone changed. She got quieter, more tense. "Are you sure about this?" she asked the person on the phone. "I mean, he seems nice enough, but..." That's when I realized she wasn't talking about meeting a friend. She was talking about me. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Not afraid, exactly, but calculating. "Yeah, okay," she continued. "I'll text you when it's done." The light turned green, and I started driving again, but my mind was racing. When what was done? What was she talking about? I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she was talking about a work project, or meeting up with someone else, or any number of innocent explanations. But something in my gut was telling me to pay attention. A few minutes later, she asked me to change the destination. "Actually, can we go to 1247 Riverside Drive instead?" My friend moved the location. I checked the address in my GPS. It was in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. Warehouses, empty lots, the kind of place that's deserted at night. Not exactly where you'd expect someone to be meeting friends. "Are you sure that's right?" I asked. "That's kind of a strange area to be meeting someone." "Yeah, it's right," she said, but her voice sounded different now. More aggressive. "Just drive." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to end this ride. But I was also thinking about my rating, about the money, about not wanting to seem paranoid or discriminatory. So I kept driving. As we got closer to the new destination, she made another phone call. "We're about 5 minutes out," she said. "Is everything ready?" "Ready for what?" I wanted to ask, but I was afraid of the answer. The area we were driving through was getting more and more isolated. Streetlights were sparse, buildings were dark, and there were no other cars on the road. If something was going to happen, this would be the perfect place for it. That's when I saw the cars. 3 vehicles parked in what looked like an empty lot next to a closed warehouse. Their headlights were off, but I could see the silhouettes of people inside. As we got closer, one of the cars flashed its headlights twice. "That's them," Sarah said. "Pull over there." I slowed down, but I didn't stop. Something was very, very wrong. Actually, you know what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just realized I'm almost out of gas. We should probably find a gas station first. No, she said sharply. Stop here. Now. I looked in the rearview mirror again, and this time I saw something that made my blood run cold. She had taken something out of her purse. I couldn't see what it was, but the way she was holding it, the way her posture had changed, told me everything I needed to know. Instead of stopping, I hit the gas. What are you doing? She demanded. I said stop. I'm not stopping, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'm taking you back to where I picked you up. That's when she showed me what was in her hand. A knife. Not a big one, but big enough. Pull over now, or I'll use this, she said. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether I lived or died. I could stop the car and hope for the best, or I could try something desperate. I chose desperate. I slammed on the brakes and yanked the wheel hard to the right, sending the car into a skid. The sudden movement threw Sarah forward, and the knife went flying. Before she could recover, I had the car doors locked and was flooring it toward the nearest main road. She was screaming at me, hitting the back of my seat, trying to grab the wheel. But I just kept driving, ignoring everything except getting us both back to civilization. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station and immediately called 911. By the time the police arrived, Sarah had gone completely silent. She just sat there in the back seat, staring at nothing. She was trying to play the innocent card, but it didn't work. Sarah was charged with attempted kidnapping and assault. Her accomplices were arrested at the warehouse. Turned out they'd been responsible for at least 6 other incidents over the past 3 months. I stopped driving for Uber that night. The money wasn't worth wondering if every passenger was planning to hurt me. But the thing that still bothers me is how normal she seemed at first. How easily I could have convinced myself that my instincts were wrong. The scariest part about working nights, whether you're driving for a rideshare company or doing anything else, is that you never know who's really getting into your car. Behind every normal face, every polite conversation, every routine pickup, there could be someone who's planned out exactly how your night is going to end. And it might not be the way you're expecting.